Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. As always, I am Jonathan, your host here at QuickBird Gaming, and I appreciate you tuning in for another episode of QuickBird News. This week's episode is going to cover all the gaming news from August 17th to August 23rd, and we have a few things to discuss. A few things that have come out of Gamescom, like the fact that Game Science might have another banger on their hands. Elsewhere, we see Paradox Studios, the developer behind Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, seems to have stepped in it with both feet. However, before we get to all that, we have to talk about the biggest story of the week, and that is Silksong. Okay, let's talk about it. As this article from PC Games In, which was published on Thursday the 21st of August, shows, Hollow Knight Silksong now has a release date. And as we scroll down here, let's see. Okay, there it is. The release date is confirmed on Thursday, September 4th, which is literally less than 2 weeks away now. So from the time they made this announcement, they were right at the 2-week mark. I have no idea how they kept this under wraps. This isn't like they're announcing, the first gameplay trailer or an early access or an open beta. No, this is the game. It's ready to launch. And I think that the fact that it is so close took everybody off guard. Don't forget that Silksong is the most wish-listed game on Steam, so this game has a lot of interest, and people are really excited about it. And I think this is fantastic. So let's see. This talks about, right here, Hollow Knight Silksong is due to launch on PC via Steam, as well as all the major consoles. This is also a win as far as I'm concerned. Now, as you can tell just by looking at this, the Hollow Knight series is not the most graphically demanding of titles out there. But if they can get this to work on PC and on all the major consoles flawlessly, that is a major victory in this day and age, considering some very high-profile games, like recently Monster Hunter Wilds, had so many optimization problems and did not perform well on PC. I think Wu Chang Fallen Feathers had the same type of issue. If I remember correctly, when Cyberpunk 2077 released a few years ago, the performance on the PlayStation 4 was abysmal. So these kinds of issues, these kind of optimization across platforms, have plagued high-profile games in the past. If they can make this work across all these platforms, that is awesome. Okay, so let's see what else I was going to come down here. This talks a little bit about how the history of this came out. It's going to come on Game Pass, and they say that it was first announced in 2019. It has undergone a series of delays, announcement delays, pushing it back. They said they wouldn't name a release date until they were sure the game was up to snuff, if it was going to, be as good as the original one. Had a quiet few years. Let's see, then we talk about the delays and pushing it back and so on and so forth. Let's see, somewhere in here, I don't remember where, but somewhere in here they point out the fact that this started off as a DLC. And as I last remembered, Silksong was going to be a DLC to Hollow Knight. But it appears now it's going to be its own standalone game. I haven't seen a price on this. I don't think a price has been confirmed. I checked the Steam page a few minutes ago, and it has not been updated as of the evening of Saturday, the 23rd of August. So inside 2 weeks, we still don't have a price. Some discussion I've seen, some people saying insiders, it seems to be the consensus coming down to $20, $25. If I remember correctly, the game was $15 American, their first game on its release. So $20 to $25, given inflation, development costs, and whatnot, seems reasonable. And to me, this is just another indicator of how well the indie game space is doing right now. Team Cherry, the makers of Hollow Knight and Silksong, are not a AAA studio, but they are delivering a product that gamers really want and can really sink their teeth into. And the fact of the matter is, if they put this game out even at $25 and it's flawless, minimal bugs, it works cross platforms, doesn't have any issues, and it is as good as the players who enjoyed the first one, if they think this game is just as good, then this is a monumental success on their part. And like I said, this is the most wish-listed game on Steam right now, so this could absolutely be a runaway success. Just to hammer that point home a little bit more, I turn over to this IGN article, which was also published on Thursday the 21st. Hollow Knight reaches 15 million copies sold. And I scroll down here, and they said they have officially sold 15 million units across PC and the consoles. And I read over in another article, I think it was on Game Rant, that they had sold 12 million of these copies since Silksong was announced. So the game has maintained interest and staying power throughout this time. Now, there's no reliable information on exactly what the development cost on this game was. I do know that the creators, Team Cherry, which, by the way, is a studio of three individuals, 3 dudes in Australia working on this. They had done a Kickstarter back during the development of the first game, which I think raised around 57,000 Australian dollars. And they had also mentioned that they had put in their personal savings for this. So I'm going to guess that the development cost was somewhere under $1 million all told for this game, and yet sold 15 million copies. Now, I believe they released it at $15 American when they first put it out. Now, given that a lot of these games are going to be sold on sale, at half price, and also that Steam and PlayStation Store and the storefronts took their cut, I think it's still safe to say that the revenues for this game over the course of its lifetime were probably in excess of $100 million, given that 15 million copies at $15 a piece would be $225 million. With all the other factors, I'd still safe to say that this game was over $100 million of revenue. And if they spent $1 million or less in development, that's a hell of a return. Now, even if the development cost for Silksong is 10 times that, you're still looking at an enormous success for them. And I think players are going to respond. I really do, because if I go over to the Steam database page for Hollow Knight and start looking at it, you can see that just in the last week, they have hit their all-time peak. The all-time peak was earlier today at 33,000 players. And I'll go to, that's a 3-month total, actually. You can see that they're at about 8,000 to 12,000 players over the last 3 months. Similarly, over the last 6 months, 8,000 to 12,000 players, 13,000 on some months. So they were staying in that range, but following the Gamescom hype and then following the announcement of Silksong coming out, they hit a new peak. They have generated enough momentum with their announcement that I think that people are excited, and because the release of the game is so close, less than 2 weeks as of making this video, the excitement is going to carry over. They have really handled this, they being Team Cherry, have really handled this in the best way possible. If they have a working, functional game that's ready to go in 2 weeks' time, people are still going to be hyped, they're still going to be excited, and this is going to be incredible for them. I also want to say this is somewhat of a teachable moment for the games industry at large, if you allow me to deviate from just Hollow Knight for a second. I think about games like this, where you see a small studio with a limited development budget that gives the gamer something they really like and really enjoy, and it's a runaway success. I mean, you saw it earlier this year with Schedule 1, where it was one individual who made that game, and it sold, I think it's sold several million copies by now. But it's priced at $20, a runaway success. You take it up slightly one step, you go to Sandfall Studios and Clair Obscur. It's a AA game, but you have a limited development team. I think there were 30 to 35 core members with some other work hired out on the side, but still a smaller team. They kept the development price in the mid tens of millions. They sold 3 to 4 million copies, and pretty much it became a success. Possibly our game of the year. We're just going to have to wait and see when we get a little closer to that time. But I think it's going to win plenty of awards come award season. And you see that these are games that they're keeping their development team small. They're keeping the development cost tight. And they're giving players something they want. They're maybe not even innovating in the case of Hollow Knight, because I think Metroidvanias are fairly common. But something about it just really got players interested. Now, let's contrast that with the state of the AAA industry right now. Let's think about some recent games like Assassin's Creed Shadows. and a 9-figure development cost. It'd been in development for years. Did it make money? I mean, maybe some. It clearly wasn't enough to save Ubisoft, as they had to splinter their company and kind of fork over part of it to Tencent in order to stay solvent. You think about games like Concord, which I know we bring up Concord all the time, but it's because it is such a glaring example of cost overrun with no return. You can even go back as far as the Saints Row reboot that Volition put out. It had been in development for years, cost them millions of dollars, and it crashed and burned to the point that it took down Volition. A 30-year studio was dissolved after that happened. Wonder Woman, which earlier this year was in development by Warner Brothers, and it was over $100 million. They didn't have a playable game, and they finally axed it. Finally, a studio didn't follow the sunk cost fallacy, and they let it go rather than continue to pour money into it. This ought to be very concerning to people who are fans of series or of franchises like Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls 6 was announced 7 years ago, and we don't have it. It's been in development for 10 plus years. Bioshock 4 has been, which I said we're going to talk about, has been in development for years. These games that have such a long development cycle, and you start to wonder what the tail of this is, the logistical tail, and how costly it has been, and how many copies they have to sell to make a success. I know some industry pundits will point to things like Grand Theft Auto 6. Yes, Grand Theft Auto 6 can cost $1 billion and be in development for 12 years because it's GTA. It's going to sell a ton. Rockstar is in that position that they can afford to do that. But that is clearly the exception and not the rule, with companies spending millions and millions of dollars and then getting nothing out of it. I think what we're going to start seeing is, if the AAA studios don't pull back from the way that they're approaching games development, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to have to pull back, or they're going to collapse, or they're going to start going the Activision Blizzard route with Call of Duty, where they just churn out the same game kind of over and over and subsist on microtransactions. I'm really starting to wonder if the single-player space is going to become more the realm of the indies. Nature abhors a vacuum, so as the AAA studios start to fail harder, and I have no reason to believe they're not going to, indies are going to rush in to fill the void. And maybe that's what should happen. Well, maybe if I wanted to be more accurate, I would have said indie studios and non-Western studios will fill the single-player gap, because you still have some thriving examples in Japan, like Capcom and the Resident Evil series. You have Square Enix and Final Fantasy, Shift Up with Stellar Blade. So you do have some Asian companies that are producing some great games. And now, then, of course, we had, coming out of China, we had Game Science's Black Myth Wukong. And as this article from Eurogamer, which was published on Tuesday, August 19th, points out, Game Science is coming back with another game in that series. And as they say down here, Black Myth Wukong Studio Game Science revealed it's working on the next game. Black Myth Zhong Kui, apologies if I mispronounce that, will be an all-new follow-up focused on the titular ghost-catching god who wanders between hell and earth. Like Wukong, it will be another single-player action RPG rooted in Chinese folklore. And they showed a brief trailer, which didn't reveal a whole lot about the gameplay. It just kind of set the tone for it. And it shows that they are carrying on, they being Game Science, are carrying on this series, and it's going to be another similarly themed game with the Chinese folklore. There's no release date yet, but I'm going to go ahead and say, if you just want to clip it, I bet we see this game in 2027. I'm just thinking that they, being Game Science, are on a schedule. And I don't think they're going to sit back and rest on their laurels and wait, 10 years like some of our, Western AAA studios are doing. But anyway, it's been announced. And as I have further news, I will be sure to pass it along. So as further example of AAA game studios that are not doing so hot, I have this article from IGN, which was published on Tuesday, Thursday, the 21st of August, Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines 2 has 2 clans locked behind DLC because of business. The decision to lock 2 of Bloodlines 2's 6 clans behind a DLC add-on pack is a business-informed choice, publisher Paradox has said. It started with the reveal the game would feature 4 clans, I think all of which were featured in the original. While this selection provides 4 different ways for how to build your character, it's more limited compared to the original, which featured 7 clans. Reacting to fan feedback, developer has added further 2 clans to Bloodlines 2, but these are only available as part of the Shadows and Silk add-on pack, which costs $22 as DLC or is included in the $90 premium edition. The standard edition costs $60. This DLC is available from day one, which has created the impression that the full roster has been carved up, with only those paying extra getting the complete launch experience. So here you have a game that appears to have generated a lot of content, and they are basically cutting content out of the completed game in order to milk it with a DLC or with special editions. That is the appearance of what they're doing. And it understandably has a lot of fans upset. Now, Paradox normally does not make RPGs, and they're not a big fan of making them. I'm going back to October with this PC Gamer article. Paradox wants to get out of the RPG business. If Bloodlines 2, God willing, is successful, Bloodlines 3 will be done by somebody else. And this article talks about the delays that this had. The game was originally announced in 2019, was supposed to be out in 2020. Here we are 5 years later, and they're just now starting to get ready to get it out. And they say, yes, it will be. So if Bloodlines 2 is successful, they're basically repeating the headline. It's not in our strategic direction to make this type of game. So that's very much, that's where their mindset is. They said, we don't drop, as for the future of Bloodlines True, we don't drop games. We make sure they work. We will fulfill the promise they have. So can you expect the usual slate of updates and fixes? Or you can, but DLC, I wouldn't hold your breath. They say Bloodlines does not have a super long shelf life. That's not the way these games behave. You have an influx of players. There's a bit of word of mouth. They have a high peak and then trail off. So I think that's a part of why these games are not really attractive to us. And then this is the key statement. So regardless of outcome, Bloodlines is a dead end. So in my opinion, this is just another example of a AAA game studio that is basically dropping the ball here. They're essentially saying they don't care about the outcome of this game, except in the sense that they want it to be financially successful because they have to answer to their shareholders, their stock investors, but they don't really care from the player's perspective. They're going through the motions. They made the commitment to produce it belatedly, several years later, but they are not really invested in the game's success. And this is understandably irritating to players who are interested in this IP, especially those that have been waiting for a sequel for 20 years. Paradox, I don't know if it's going to hurt them that much long term because they're getting out of this type of game, and the audience for their normal types of games, the kind of the strategic gameplay, probably doesn't cross over with this one very much. So they're not going to lose a whole lot. But I also have to look at it like we're in an era right now where every single dollar the consumer has is more and more valuable because the cost of living is out of control, and players are looking for excuses to not buy a particular game. They'd rather save it or put it towards their grocery bill or just buy something else. They're going to be getting more and more finicky with the dollars they spend. I don't think developers can afford to alienate any of their customers. Time will tell if that's proven correct or not. But anyway, this game is, I believe, it's supposed to be out in October, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if it's going to be any good or not. I do know 2 people personally that have said that they are no longer interested in this game based on Paradox's attitude and specifically the DLC shenanigans. So, there's 2 sales lost. How many more will there be? Okay, I said we'd talk about Bioshock 4, and here we are. This PC Games In article that was published on Tuesday, August 19th. Ex-Diablo 4 boss takes over Bioshock 4 amid turbulent development. So this guy, Rod Ferguson, announced he was leaving Blizzard. The post came out of the blue, and now he is returned to 2K as the head of the Bioshock franchise, and he's returning at a very turbulent time. In the post announcing his new role, Ferguson, who was previously an executive on Bioshock Infinite, made sure to recognize that the studio restructuring is a difficult time for the team. While it's unclear how many developers have been impacted by layoffs, 2K is clearly unhappy with the recent direction of the Bioshock franchise. Bioshock 4, or whatever it will be called, has been in official development since 2018, and players have had few signs it's even alive or know what state it's in. And that's very much the truth. And it was only a couple weeks ago that QuickBird News reported that the higher-ups at Take-Two had gone to look at this, look at where Bioshock 4 was, and basically said this is completely unacceptable. And they were sending some stuff back to very fundamental basics. So it's possible that the layoffs that are coming up are related to that fact. The people that were underperforming may be let go. However, I go over to that article published the next day on Wednesday the 20th at Insider Gaming. They lay off 30% of their studio. Take-Two Interactive has laid off around 30% of the staff at Cloud Chamber, the studio behind the next Bioshock game. More than 80 jobs were cut in the changes, with the studio said to have had around 250 employees before the layoffs. So they wiped out 1/3 of their workforce. This David Ismailer, the 2K president, states the decision was made to rework certain aspects that are core to a Bioshock game and for reducing the size of the development team to focus on this work and give the game more time in development, though Bioshock is already one of the longest running productions in gaming history. So, where is this game going? Essentially, it has been in production for years. We have nothing to show. They've already announced that it was what was being done was unsatisfactory, and now they've just cut, 80 positions. They couldn't get it done with 250. Are they going to get it done with 170? All signs point to no. This is going to get harder for them before it gets easier. And this goes to what I alluded to earlier, where we talk about a game's development tail, the logistics involved in it. The longer it's in production, you're paying the salaries of all these people for years. You're paying for your office space. You're paying for keeping the lights on. You're paying for the server rentals and the licenses for the game engine. If they're paying Unreal, for all of these things that they continue to pay for, the longer it's in development, the more these costs mount up, and the more the game has to sell when it finally does come out. The more critical it is a success because they've tied up more and more resources into making it work. And at this point, they could flush this game, kind of like Warner Brothers did with Wonder Woman, and bow out. We'd never see a Bioshock game again. But if they keep going and the game doesn't sell, it's going to have the same net effect. So, their only real option way forward is to have a kick-ass game, but is there any sign that's going to be the case? So it's really disappointing for fans of this franchise, but it's also, like I said, another data point in the ongoing struggles of the Western AAA gaming industry. I just don't see this getting any better for Bioshock, unfortunately, because I really like the first 3 games. I've probably mentioned before that I really like modding. I think the modding communities are generally a net positive for games because I think they keep interesting games going. And I think anything that allows a user to tailor their game so that they can enjoy their own experience in the way they want to is a good thing. Bear in mind, I am talking about single-player games here. I understand the complications and challenges involved with multiplayer games, especially competitive multiplayer games. But for single-player games, there's really no excuse for modding not to exist if players want it. Having said all that, my eyes were drawn to this DualShockers article that was published on Thursday the 21st. Nexus Mods need your ID to show adult content, but there's an exception. They're rolling out an update, and this time it's for something so staggeringly unpopular it has become a bit of a meme. ID verification for adult content. So, Nexus Mods being a UK website and a UK company, they are required to comply with the United Kingdom's Online Safety Act, and no adult content will be shown unless somebody can prove ID. Now, we are already, kind of the last month and a half has really been a flurry of activity for online age gating, and censorship across various forms of social media, gaming, websites, and potentially with upcoming games, rumors of GTA 6 requiring age verification. And things like YouTube rolling out their algorithm for age, trying to guess the age and wall off content from people they think are too young. The exception that they list is that they say that if your account is 10 years old, you won't need to show ID, I guess, under the assumption that if you've been with the site 10 years, you're clearly old enough to be an adult. Whatever, I guess. Now, granted, they say that this is only applicable to websites or people coming from the United Kingdom, and that if things develop in the EU, they will comply, and otherwise there's no change to any other users worldwide, pending changes in those countries' legislations, regarding age verification, which has not been the case in the United States. So there will be, I consider myself fortunate. There will be no changes for me and for my fellow American players, but this really does suck for, my people in Britain and in the United Kingdom and other areas where age verification is being looked at as the government as a good thing. So I encourage people to explore alternatives to Nexus Mods that are hosted in countries that don't believe in this kind of control and censorship. Unfortunately, Nexus Mods really is the biggest and most comprehensive modding site on the internet. So if you're going to continue to use it, just be aware of the limitations. All right, we're going to bookend this video. We started off by talking about indie games, and we're going to leave off with a couple articles about indie games. We'll start with this one from Game Rant, which was published on Thursday, 21st of August. Stardew Valley creator comments on controversial Infinity Nikki collaboration. Eric Barone, the one-man development team behind Stardew Valley, is standing behind his decision to enter a controversial collaboration effort with action-adventure game Infinity Nikki. And it says, the fans' negative reaction to the recently announced collaboration marks a rare moment of negative press for him. See, farming game has found itself embroiled in controversy after fans expressed displeasure with the collaboration between the two games, which many players of Infinity Nikki see as a distraction from problems that have been present since late April. These issues include heavy monetization of the free-to-play game's gacha system, story retconning, and performance issues. And they have been compounded by the developers' perceived censorship of critics. So in response to this, Barone, known as Concerned Ape, says, there have been a few collaborations between Stardew Valley and other games over the years. To be clear, I never received money for these collabs. I've only done them because I was a fan of the other games or because I genuinely thought the players would like it. He had done one with, I believe, Terraria, and there was at least one other. I don't remember if it's Balatro. Yeah, Terraria and Balatro. They've done collabs for. Now, look, I have to say this. Stardew Valley really defined the cozy farming sim as a genre. Its influence on indie game development has been outsized. I think it sold something in the neighborhood of 40 million copies. So I would say that Eric Barone, or Concerned Ape, has kind of earned the right to do what he wants with his IP because the game has done so well. Now, if players are upset, like the article references, that the collaboration is meant to draw attention away from Infinity Nikki's other problems, that's a fair critique, but that's really on the developer of Nikki, not on the developer of Stardew Valley. I think he pretty much, and in the fact that he says he's not doing this for the money, he's doing it for the love of the game. He's picking out either franchises that he likes or thinks the fans will like. I'm not sure why people want to give this guy a hard time. I think he's pretty much just kind of following his heart with his game development, and people ought to leave him alone. But, sometimes people got to have something to bitch about just so they feel like they can. All right, I'm going to wrap up with this article from IGN, which was published on Wednesday, the 28th of August. Peak sells 10 million copies. Indie climbing hit Peak has officially sold 10 million copies, according to Alina Analytics analyst Reese Elliott and Gamescom opening night live host Jeff Keighley. Elliott first reported the sales figure on Monday in his newsletter, saying it had sold 1.7 million copies last week and was expected to pass 10 million by Tuesday. Keighley then confirmed the figure on stage at opening night live. It's the second indie game released in 2025 to pass this milestone. Peak has seen significant success on Steam since its launch in June and has been consistently listed as one of the most played games. At the time of this article was written, it was sitting on about 88,000 concurrent players. At the time of this video recording, we can go over and look, and it's at about 55,000 players right now. Although if you look at the last month's play, look at the last week, you can see it's still hitting close to 100,000 players or topping that every day. So getting 100,000 players every day. They had a big peak when the game went on sale, and also when they released their DLC called Mesa. They had a big spike in play, reached up to 170,000 players. So this game is doing really, really well. And let's see. Peak is a survival game developed by Aggro Crab, where up to 4 players climb a mountain together, overcoming obstacles and managing their stamina. Aggro Crab is also the studio behind Another Crab's Treasure, which was a very well-received indie game as well. So here we have another example of an indie game that is excelling and thriving. You saw the graphics when I looked over at Steam. This is what the graphics look like in the game. It's not, flashy. It doesn't have the latest dynamic water and lighting textures. It doesn't have 400 people working on a development team to make this game. It's small, it's tight, but the gameplay loop is compelling, and that's what players want. So, as AAA continues to falter, I think the future is still bright as indie games do rush into the gap to fill their place. I think the future of gaming is bright as long as the indie market is out there, because the heart and the passion and the innovation is being found at the independent games level now. I am here for it. Okay, folks, we're going to wrap this one up right here. As always, I thank you for tuning in for this episode of QuickBird News. I'll be back next week with more news to talk about. We'll go over everything that's going on in the gaming world, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you enjoyed this content, please consider leaving a like on the video, drop a comment down below, and let me know if there was a story I should have talked about more. And if you're really enjoying it, please consider subscribing. It just takes one click, and it helps me out a whole lot. I really enjoy making these videos. I really enjoy seeing the little bit of discussion I do get, but it's a creator's vanity. I would like more people to see it. I'm going to go on making them even if I never get more subscribers. But if you do enjoy it, I would appreciate it if you did go ahead and click that subscribe button. And I thank you in advance. Anyway, like I said, we're going to wrap this up here. Thanks for tuning in. You all go out there, live your best lives, and you all stay gaming.